All right. You got the recording going, I got the camera going. So, not much in module 9. So that one worked well for us on that. The subheading that I mentioned is in module 11. Drill work we at least do have one day. So we'll go over that then and do it. Tuesday, we will do the tabling. I sent out to the online students yesterday about that they could come join us on Tuesday. Today, I'm assuming that we'll have a full class meeting with the weather conditions out there and the weather predictions. However, I don't have to make a run to Dalton today because I had just changed that class to online on Collaborate today with the permission of the administration to save me from having to do a drive over there and a drive back. Which, from the way they predict, the later in the day it's supposed to get worse. I don't know if any of y'all have watched the temperatures this morning, but they have been dropping every hour. Besides getting y'all the wrong key to get into the room, last night when I got home, I discovered my power had gone off, and I reset my clock, my alarm clock, and set it again. And somehow I set it off by an hour. And when I woke up this morning and the alarm was sounding, I went, it just doesn't look right. It's supposed to be at 6:30, and then I looked at my phone and realized it was 5:30. And I had set the clock an hour ahead. So apparently I decided last night we were supposed to go ahead and get on the daylight savings time at that point. So then I got up, changed the clock to the correct time, and laid there a little longer. But at that point at 5:30 it was 41, and now it's down to 38. And falling. It's supposed to get down to 26 tonight, so we'll see what happens. I really don't expect school to probably, unless the conditions really deteriorate, close early today or open late tomorrow, or close tomorrow. Because we've got orientation and registration for new students for B session here and in Rome today, and then in the morning in Dalton. And so, unless things get really nasty up there, I don't think we can help. As opposed to a regular school day with nothing extra special going on. So, again, next Thursday, we won't have class. As a matter of fact, the next 3 Thursdays, we won't have class. And then, but the next 2 Tuesdays, we will have class, but not the 3rd. Okay? So March the 10th, I think that is, something like that. Does that sound correct? I think Tuesday's the 10th that week. There won't be class that Tuesday or Thursday.
Yeah, you're right.
Huh?
Yeah, you were correct.
I was correct.
Yeah.
Okay. I was wrong previously in my head on it, and I finally decided the 9th is the Monday. Because I will be, actually that Tuesday, I will be related to your class, because I'll be sitting in CIST updates and training all that day up in Pinehurst, North Carolina. So that will be that. I have not graded anything else yet for the class. I got through this week's discussions, grading that yesterday. I was going to do some grading some classes and ended up answering email all morning and stuff. And then when I got to the afternoon, I went rating on the discussion, and I had looked up as I started on that, it was 1 o'clock, and I was still answering emails in the midst of all that. And the next thing I looked up, I realized it was after 4 o'clock. You know, whoa. So, and then last night, I answered a couple of emails last night or early this morning. I worked on another project of mine last night, so I didn't even really do stuff with classes last night. I didn't get home till 8 o'clock, I think. I had church till 7, and then I ran to the store to get something before I got home. So, hopefully I can get some grading done, maybe this afternoon, and maybe this morning also, because now I'll take away a 45-minute drive both directions. Because it takes 45 minutes, in case any of y'all have driven from here to the Dalton campus. It's almost a full 45 minutes between the two campuses. And they don't consider that in my workload for me, but that is part of my work package. It didn't get any lighter yet on the fact that I spend 3 hours a week on the road. But those of you that have already been out there working know how that works. And they don't give you gas in it. I guess my car has some ability to do something. Okay. So, next module, which is module 9, is on ARP, A-R-P. And there's not a whole lot on ARP there, and actually, basically, except for where they talk about network discovery on IP version 6, basically, I've already told y'all everything they've got in there about ARP, okay? And told you really, I think, a little bit further than what they do. But before I do that, any questions on where we talked about the basic part of how IP version 4 worked the other day? I'm not going to erase it off there right now, because I really don't need the board what we're doing today. But just in case y'all have questions on it. That's really going to appear for y'all, I believe, in module 11, which is when we do subnetting, and that should be in that chapter. So we're a little ahead of the game on that one, which is good, because when we go to do the subnetting, it'll be important, okay? But that'll come back to play for you. And that's where they're going to throw you some of the things I threw you up. Okay? Because even though we don't use classes anymore, you still are doing things related to classes. It's just like we talked about private addresses. No, we don't do things based on class anymore. I've told y'all that wasted lots of space, but we're still doing these addresses here, which are related back to the class. So you do need to go to class on it still, although you're not. Class is not as important as it was in the past, but y'all need to know it anyway. Okay? So we'll come back and talk some more. And nobody said I couldn't spell bite the other day. I just noticed that wasn't correct there. So with ARP, ARP is an address resolution protocol. And if you remember when we talked about DNS, and we really haven't got this deep in DNS until we get later in this book, and particularly in the future, other two courses. That with DNS, we took a domain name and changed it to an IP address. We found what was the IP address for a domain name. So that if you put in www.dwightwatt.com, DNS finds out what's the IP IP address for www.dwightwatt.com, which is 68 point something, 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 I think. But, and prior to us having DNS, you had to know everything by its number, which is why the internet was not used much. So then that combined led to being able to do the World Wide Web and led to popularity of culture. But with that, that was that part. Now what we're looking at is with ARP, and to me, ARP should have been covered before, because ARP's not done on the network layer. ARP is actually used down on the data link layer. So I think we got a chapter here all mixed up where it should be, because it should have been before we got into the network layer. Because what ARP does is takes the IP address and finds out what the MAC address for it is. And that occurs on layer 2. Okay? The ARP's not a layer 3 protocol, it's a layer 2 protocol. But we're going to take that IP address that we've already found from the domain name address, from the domain address, possibly, or somebody could have just used a straight IP address. Okay? In any event, you know what the IP address is, and the IP address is used in which type of data unit? In the packet. Okay? And so when the packet gets passed down to layer 2, you know what the IP address is. Now, what layer 2 needs to build the frame is it needs the MAC address. Okay? It's going to work similar to how DNS is working, but not exactly. Okay? You have got out there MAC tables that are on your machine. So we're even down, all the way down to the bottom sublayer of the 2 sublayers. But it's going to use ARP to take that IP address, and then it's going to look in that MAC address table and see, does it know what the MAC address is for that IP address. Okay? Now, unless you're at the very end of sending, the MAC address it's going to find is not the MAC address that actually goes with that IP address, but the MAC address of the next device on the way to the end. Is there a good follow on that? That table, what it's going to have built is, as frames come in, it's going to look at, it's going to know where it came from. Because that's obvious, it's got the MAC address of where did it come from. And then it's looking at it and going, okay, when it pulls the packet out of there, this assembles a frame, looks at it and sees, this is the IP address it came from. So it's going to build into its MAC table. It's going to look and see, do I already know about that IP address? If I don't, let's put it in the table. Because now I know where it came from. Because if that frame came all the way from that IP address, you know where it last came from as it was coming. And so now you can put into your table, it will put into it. You're not going to. I'm going to say you a lot of times as y'all caught on, when it's really the machine does it, okay? But you're not going to enter that in there. It's a dynamic entry. The machine's going to put that IP address and the MAC address that it just came from into its table. So we follow on that? Now, you can put static entries into that table also. And if you put static entries in, you're going to put the same information in. It's just you're putting in a static entry for it. And actually, they're going to call it an ARC table. So where I just said Mac table, ARC table, okay? I've seen it called both things. But for your courses, an ARC table. But it's going to build and put dynamic entries in there. Now, when it puts that entry in there, it doesn't stay permanently in there as a dynamic entry. It only stays for a set amount of time, unless it's renewed in the table. So we follow on that. So every time it sees something, it's already in the table, it's just going to change the timestamp again to the current time, and it stays. At a certain point, and that will depend on how the settings are set on the machine on it, it's going to remove entries from the table. Because you don't want real old entries in the table. Because stuff changes, okay? And it's been sitting there for a good amount of time. You want it to remove it from it and go learn again on it. Because the layout of your network changes continuously. And what direction is the best direction for stuff coming in. So it's going to get the MAC address there. So now if it's sending, it's going to go look in the table, the ARC table, see is that IP address in the ARC table. If the IP address is there, it then grabs that MAC address and uses that MAC address onto the frame and it builds the frame as the destination. What's it going to put for the source?
The host that it came from?
No, the machine it's sitting on right now, whatever interface it's going to go out on that machine. Okay? So it will grab then, so then it will put on there that, the MAC address of the port it's going out on. Okay? So it knows that number. Okay? And it's got multiple ports on there, so it has to use the port that it's going to use to go out. So if you're looking at the ARC table, I should have an illustration on it for you. There we go. Besides having the MAC address, it's going to tell you in the ARC table which port it goes out on. Okay? So you're going to get the IP addresses in the table, the MAC address it came from of where it learned about that IP address, and the interface that came in on. Because now when you're sending it out, you're getting out of the table. You know the IP address because that's what you're hooking up with. You're getting the MAC address that it's going to be going to, and it tells you which port is it going to use. Is it going to use gigabit 01 or serial 01 or whichever? Well, then the machine knows what MAC address is assigned to that port. So then it just grabs that, puts that address on there as the source. So everybody follow on that part?
Yeah.
Now, if it's not in the table, it will send a request out, an ARC request at that point, and ask for, does anybody know what MAC address is for this IP address? The only thing it's going to reply back is immediately connected stuff to it. okay, on its network before it connects to the other networks. It's not going to know about what's on them, it's just getting to them. So unless it's on their network, more than likely, you're not going to get a reply back. And all they're going to do is then just use the default gateway that's in that ARP table. Go to that address as the MAC address they're going to use, okay? Which is just to the next, whichever port we've defined as our default port, and that's just wherever it goes to, but it's not going to be connected to, because it knows what port it's connected to. It knows what device it's connected to, correction. So that's what's happening in ARP. Now DNS went on through and did several things on Upwork, several layers of, if it wasn't in the table in DNS, it then broadcasted out that, then the next level sent it on out to there, and that it got up to the highest level of DNS tables, and actually found out, does it really exist or not on the internet, okay? Normally, you never have to go, it's like 5 layers up, but you never have to go to the root domain name server. Normally, you just have to go up a layer or two because somebody else has been to that address before you, okay? And think about it, most of the things you go to that you go with a domain name, most of the time is places you've been before. It's not very often you type in a new domain name. You did when you started school here, but you did use a new one at that point to go to Blackboard. But then you keep using gntc.blackboard.com. Guess what? Your machine knows the address, so it doesn't have to look any further than to its domain name table. Okay? And so it's not even the first time though that you did it on your machine. Yeah, it had to send on out, but guess what? As long as you are in this area, that your provider already had somebody that been to that address before. Now, if we head out and we got on a new machine, we ran out to Portland and went down to the library there in Portland to get on back for GNTC, and we did it. It's going to be a slight little longer pause, but not enough that you're going to realize on it because of how fast it's running on it, as that machine's going to have to, the local ISP out there is probably that they're connected to, probably just not been to GNTC.Blackboard, and that's going to have to go up a level or two to where it finds it. Okay? Because probably nobody out in Portland's been on GNTC.Blackboard.com. Might have been, but probably not. But any ISP here in Northwest Georgia has definitely had people that have been to that site numerous times, so it's kept real refreshed in their table. Okay? And here's the correct one. Likewise, going to the ARC table on it, once you got into it, it's not going to have to do any further work. It remembers on it when you get out. So on IP version 4, you're using the ARC table. You're using ARC, Address Resolution Protocol. Just for y'all's information, it's not in this book. When I just looked through the chapter, I didn't see it. It was in a previous one, but it's very, actually, I think it was the previous version. They had a paragraph on this one. So it may appear somewhere else in the book, but I didn't see it in this chapter. There is another protocol called RARP, R-A-R-P, which is Reverse Address Resolution Protocol. Not used a whole lot, but it does get used sometimes. What that allows you to do is to take a MAC address and find out what the IP address is for that MAC address. Okay? And that's what that protocol does. So it's just the opposite of ARP. again, like I know it's not used very often, but they did have it on sale. It was mentioned very briefly in the previous version of the book. So obviously the authors of that book thought it was something people ought to know about or thought the name of it was just a fascinating name to tell you about it. For whatever reason, it was there. And when I took this class, my instructor told us about it, although it wasn't there either at that point. And I still remember that one. So that's that one on. Now, if you're looking at IP version 6, it does change on that. Did I not give y'all a packet tracer to do in 9? That's strange. Why didn't I give y'all that one? Okay, I guess I didn't because it doesn't grade on it, but that would have been a good one to have given y'all. I'm surprised I didn't put those in there, but I won't put them in now. And maybe I wasn't paying attention when I got along there. But in any event, it wouldn't hurt y'all to do those 2 packet tracers of the packet tracers for where it's leading to a simulation of seeing how to use ARP and also use network discovery in 6. But they're not assigned. Okay? But if you want to, if you're a hands-on learner, and some of you are, and I may add this out there as a lecture in the 3 classes. If you're more of a visual learner instead of a reading or a listening learner, I would definitely encourage you to do those 2 labs. Okay, they're just simulations, they don't grade or anything to it, but it shows you how it does work the process. So I say, some of you that would be helpful to you, some of you are more ones to learn by reading it. Some of you learn better by listening to it. For those of you that catch the rest of things more visually, then I definitely encourage you to do those 2. Okay? And even some of the others that are on the side sometimes. Okay? But you obviously don't have to write the stuff down or anything else when you do it, but you can walk through it. Since doing a simulation, I'll show you how it sends the signal out and the signal comes back. And I say, that'll be helpful to some of you probably, and some of you will be absolutely, you're going, that's just been driving me crazy. So whichever way on. But that, where we talked about ARC, we're talking about version 4. Okay? With IP version 6, you're actually going to use network discovery, ND. And they mentioned it's got a combination, another name to it also. Network, because ND is network discovery, and it could be ND or NDP, network discovery is very hard. But ND is where they are going from. So if you see ND, that's what Cisco's using. Okay. All it's doing is it's working like ARP on the same approach, except it's specifically ARP is learning, but network discovery, it actually sits there and constantly is knowing who the immediate neighbors to the machine are. Okay, so the router knows what the other router's MAC addresses are. That immediately surrounds it. So this is only our immediate neighbors. Okay? It's not several routers down the road. They just know the MAC addresses of the next machines. But if there's a switch sitting between the 2 machines, they still get to the next router. So I'm pointing router to router. Okay. But it's going to work similar to what ARC did, except for that it's going to then use some different terms. So it's going to go out with network solicitation messages, asking who all's out there. It's going to do advertisement messages, network advertisement messages, which is where it tells the others, here I am, this is my MAC addresses, this is the MAC address on this port that you're connected to, so they know about it. Likewise, the router is going to do the same thing, sending out its solicitations and advertisements. But again, this is down on layer 2, so the neighbor solicitations are going to go out there between them also. So the routers can communicate, the PC can communicate to the router, and they're going to pick those up. And then they'll build that back into their table in there. So now they've got those MAC addresses. And that there is a chapter. Okay, I told you it was a short one. And except for where we just mentioned on network discovery for IP version 6, the rest of it I already told you. Okay, because I'd already mentioned to you previously about ARC and about that's what it's going to do. Actually, when we talked about down there on layer 2 with the MAC addresses, I don't remember if they had it in the material or not, but I know I had it in what I told you. So everybody following that? So it should have been basically familiar material to you today. Okay? Now, with that small amount of material in the chapter, my intention is going to be when I'm back out of the office is one, go out and update what it says in the chapter, in the module, in Blackboard, and tell people they can optionally do those 2 packet transfer labs if they want to visually see how those things work. And 2, I think I'm going to go ahead and activate the test for next week, starting today. Since we've gone over it today, and there's not that much material in there.
So we're doing the next chapter too.
Huh?
Isn't the test on the next chapter also?
Oh, test is not activated. Forget what I just said. My preference would be, I'm not real wild on what they did on that. Always before, they've had a test on every chapter. And I like a test on every chapter. And where they've gone and combined chapters into the test. So no, skip what I just said about tests. Okay? But if there was just a test on chapter 9, I would go ahead and give it to y'all and just open it up at this point. I wouldn't change the cutoff point on it, but open it early. Okay? But so we've done what we originally had scheduled. And what I've got as far as if you look at the calendar for next week. Does that make sense to everybody now? So that worked well, but my plan then that I've come up with to do 9 today. And 8 worked well, really, in one day too. Okay. So when we get to 11, I may, since it looks like on 11, one day, that one I may stretch into a couple of weeks. But we don't have the test. I guess we got test after 12. So who knows what we'll do along with it. So I may want another day with y'all on that. But we'll definitely go over 11. That'll take the full day. And when I do that, when we go through Sunday, that I will completely fill that board up several times. And if y'all want to take pictures of the board that day, y'all can. Just tell me before I go to our race each time. If you want me to pause long enough for you to come take a picture. I know I've had some students that like to take a picture of the board. Again, my preference would be from a camera out here, but I can't log on to y'all's machines because instructors can only log on to instructor machines. They got us on separate domain from students, and y'all can't log on to instructor machines. So I'm going to try to remember when we get back to office. I'm going to ask them if I can get it. Username, password I can use on these machines. If I could have it from there running up to here, it would be a whole lot better. What turns up on the camera would show up better with the camera at the board instead of this sideways up. Now, we really would prefer to have, particularly this, where I'm going to do more to the board on it that way. But that's the way they've got it set here at this school. Other schools I've been at, you can sign on to whichever machine you want to sign on, and it only gave you access to what you're supposed to have. So it didn't really, because you're not going to have other access. And they had said a year or so ago, a person had said that they were going to get us permission, but it's not happening. And then when we do certain things, sometimes we run into that awkwardness of trying to get on. And likewise, when I go to show y'all later on, when we put a real piece of equipment in here one day, I'm going to have to get on one of the machines that y'all have logged on to, and then y'all get it around. That one will be working as when it needs. Because we don't have the stuff installed. So besides that, trying to run the cable around and get it plugged in correctly in there gets awkward too. So that I've done a number of times. Had students log on and then me work on the machine from it. So, and I suppose I could do that in this case too. Because once y'all are logged on to the machine, I can log on the Blackboard as me. And as far as Blackboard's concerned, it sees me. It's just the school machine sees different. But I'm not sure what it would do if one of the others of you, if y'all logged on to two machines. I think most of y'all are looking at the curriculum there because you don't have a book. That's your book. So y'all want to be looking at the curriculum on your machine. I'm not sure if it'd be happy with you logged on two different machines. Depending on how they have security settings set. Although it definitely will let me log on to two different machines because I'm still logged on the machine down in the office right now. It's just logged. All right, any questions for me on all of that?
So basically, module 1 is describing how one will identify the other destination and are the layer. What I'm saying is, module 9 is describing how different levels. I noticed that level 2 is on a different form of level.
So you remember with what we're working with the arc right here, what they were talking about in this chapter was particularly years. So we have to use this to find the differences.
Basically, we try to find the right. But if you're this,
So now you're getting, in this case, you're getting rid of the sins on that one. This way you're using the arc table as your sin. So you have, your machine knows IP address is for where you want to send.
I should have done that.
So that we have names and MAC address. MAC address really ground the whole network. Last year, so it's pretty easy to find that MAC address. It's just really hard.
Yeah.
I think it's not there in the ARP table.
You read all
Then it will send from the default table.
I'm probably just Martinez describing
How it goes.
Yeah, I learned that
goes
area.
from an IP
and then
address
it's shown
to
the
those. Yeah, I was looking at least tracking. And
basically,
then the
I
other
think you
part
put
is,
instructions
it tells you how it learns those MAC
which is helpful.
addresses to the IP
Imagine
address.
just do it, and we have no idea on how to do it.
I got coming from this IP address.
One of the questions
from this MAC address. So there's no correlation on.
I didn't know. There's a
It came in on this.
night address. So basically, this chat is discussing how the machine, I didn't know some information. It's teaching us. They had to.
How it got from MAC addresses and how it gets to that
You bring up
address.
the terminology, bring up the
No,
name.
I'm sorry,
I'm using the word there's like, I think, 4 or 5 and back to enter that just basically, I just start speak about it.
But I guess, but I get that on that one question. Usually when you're saying information, it has the actual data that we're
I
trying
got
to
like
see.
some of the addresses.
All right,
already.
addresses are added on, words and addresses go in the header, and then there's
It's
that.
like
Usually people,
it
mix data and information, even though data and information are two different items, and same codes and stuff.
So
If it's
basically,
raw information, if it's raw information, it's down. If it's
Oh, I
usable,
guess that's
you
what
know,
I'm saying.
it's information.
keep it more, so be careful of system where you're running as an individual. And that's like, also,
That's not how it is.
when we go, well, not. Discussion, you grade the correct, you say, there's a discussion, I know there's people who, that's.
Oh, no.
And networking.
Are you
And
talking
apparently,
this class or
you know, like, we have all the.
this class? Y'all
They have server rooms that, apparently. they keep
I was
server
wondering
rooms.
about whole.
I think it's.
I just need
because
someone with clarification.
You don't want people to cheat those.
Yeah.
There's so many of them were packed together, this probably makes sense to keep it low.
Okay, if the discussions are pure in the else class, they may be in grade.
I guess kind of like how,
They're not being graded, we're not doing discussions in this class.
do the fans and this, or the board.
The only place we have to do is faculty, have discussion or some other type of engagement. Is in pure online classes. Hybrid classes, we
I'm not-
do that.
I've never done ours.
Yours and my conversation.
Yeah.
is
I thought so too.
presentation.
And those
So classes that are in person,
most of the
engage us
different
during
fans.
Well, it's better than that's something.
Yeah.
You sit there and ask me
I've never really
questions,
tried
you want to ask me questions, or
Me
you think that you just got that wrong after a while.
I think that's
Um,
basically just like
And there's interaction occurring.
increasing the performance of
An
one,
online class,
but
they
at the
got to have
risk of
proof of
your
interaction
machine is like,
email.
your machine's not supposed to go
How much
that high,
proof,
but
they
you
don't
can
have
do
like
it.
anyone said, make sure that way, burn out, that's all.
Yeah.
My classes, that's high level.
I just gotta run it and
that I engage voice to see on that. Because I don't do something that takes that amazing, like
New model.
discussions, or
It can,
collaborates another way it's done, which I do in my online classes.
but it's still, it's pretty nice though.
The
See the other class, right?
The
Um,
bill that I wanna do, it's about like,
and so in this
it's
one,
about $1,000.
I need to remove those from
Right now, like,
that.
mainly do
It
my own
says
vocals,
in your grade.
because I always wanted to get a PC, but I never had the money to do it. Now I have the money to do it. But I'm probably still gonna get the PS5 one.
I can't remember this. If it still
That's the
says
PlayStation.
discussion on it for 10%. If it
Does
does
say
say
have grades,
that 10% is grade in this class, it's
Xbox does
discussion,
all their stuff on PC.
you automatically get that.
Yeah, I got the Game Pass, the game
100 points automatically.
with this CPU, I just got,
You got
got
it.
like 3 months.
Or
It's
that I
pretty cool.
changed and
It's like
added
the dollar thing.
Yeah.
It's free.
Yeah, there's like 100 games.
I'm not sure what it was.
You just download it and play it.
Yeah.
Does it say
I
discussion?
actually know what it is. They'll
That's
do
gonna
that on
be-
their Game Pass.
Y'all are gonna get
You
that
can just
many
face
stuff
Game
on that.
Pass and everything.
So there's 10 points for your final grade first grade. So to get to a passing grade in the class to get 70%, you want to get 60% because you got 10% given to you. So you can be lower on other stuff and still pass the grade. So that ends too long. I wasn't sure if I changed your mind. Didn't think I had. I wasn't sure.
What were we talking about? I logged in there.
Huh?
I logged in on this computer. I'm in both of them.
Okay. Then what I may do when we have the next class is have y'all either log in on that machine or that machine for me, because Kelly usually sits there.
Yeah.
And so on one of those two, I put the camera on one of them and point out there, and then that'll work better for people watching the lecture later. And whether y'all, and that one may well be a lecture y'all may go back and look at.
Yeah.
Good. So while I'm answering that question back there, you answered that question for Rick. So we did have full engagement in. Okay? He answered a question for me, and I answered questions for you, and for her. And she answered a question for me also. Just two of y'all did instructor's work. All right, any other questions for me? So Tuesday, we will meet. Assuming something doesn't go crazy with weather or whatever. I hope not. And because it is supposed to rain again on Monday. But I don't think temperature's supposed to drop off even on us. That's fine. But Thursday, we will not meet next week. But even if we do hit cancellation because of weather on Tuesday or whatever, watch and see out there. I'll probably go ahead and offer to do a live library. Y'all want to join in on it. Okay? At this class. And that way we can still cover the material. I don't normally in the collaborators have like mics on it, but there's a chat box there for you to type in questions to me, and I can type that. And or comments, and then as I go through the collaborate sessions, I just operate on two of this. Have you listened in on one? In the other class? And so she can tell you, as I'm talking, I'm continuously looking at what's in the chat box, and I answer whatever student you're doing. It's just like in here that y'all can stop and ask me a question at any point. Sometimes I may answer you immediately, but maybe sometimes I'll get to that in just a minute and defer it off for a second, and I'll do the same thing in there. So it's a completely just real close to being in a very classroom, that you're sitting there watching me. You don't need any extra equipment on your machine other than speakers or headphones. As you're watching me and listening to me, but you don't need a microphone to do it or any of that. And actually, you don't have to have speakers either, because you can actually use your phone number you can call instead, and you can call on a phone message. So, Collaborate actually gives you a phone ability to do also. So somebody that didn't have headphones or speakers can listen on that one. All right. Hopefully we won't have that, but today is the one that we're ready on it. And you guys.
We've been having too much rain.
We got way too much rain. I was just reading news items this morning saying how many inches all these different southern counties are above normal February or even December. February. How much extra rain we got. But they're saying on the rain today and the rain on Tuesday, not supposed to be that much. It shouldn't be any flooding things other than keeping all of the river stuff higher. It shouldn't get stuff flooding out like we did last week.
Yeah.
You referred to Georgia, or you referred to all?
Did you see certain cat?
Huh?
The line out there, like the other day, it looked like
It's throughout the state.
like a
of
big
Georgia.
lake. There was ducks.
Wasn't really how much was even south of it, was not south in the fall for a little bit. Because all water is all quick ground or something. They got, they're not as bad as the other sidewalk. They don't have all the water.
And the rain was so bad.
Flooded.
It swallows up the entire sidewalk and things. Yeah.
Put a stop to it.
Where's it? Yeah. This building right next to it,
It's a lot of water. You know, a lot of farming. There are peanuts raised down there.
That's
Used to be a lot of tobacco. Those number of farms I know were sidewalk raised on now. Most of the damage was the cotton on the lines. But I was taking up for
the next week.
Peanuts back when it gets to harvest time, they need dry. Actually, that drought there, that drought, as they call it.
I know we're not meeting Thursday.
Peanuts on, they
I know we're not meeting
Actually, they could have filed peanuts up, they need to be dry at that point. And
But
then
then
rain out the peanuts before they can get on the entire dog.
Unless stuff happens. Imagine having it's fall.
Because they turn them up, the peanuts in the ground, they turn them up, and then they went along. The other one's not market to dry actually at that point too.
I know spring break.
They have to have dry. I remember back in '99 or so.
He said something about like student days.
Yeah. This was even getting up to the eastward, there was cotton fields up there. And it went right from. He couldn't get in one field I drove by every day. That they know it's too wet. I don't know if you ever hit on it, it's a way so if it's very wet, they can't get. You don't see them walk in.
I don't really.
And once they've sprayed it, and they learn it out there, so I really don't know about rain on it, because if it's blocking up on it, if hurricane comes through, it just go out of the pond.
You see a lot of people thinking about.
So you can have,
That's
so
why
you need some right periods to.
Chances
Chances is high that it's gonna rain too.
Oh, I know that. And I don't know, like a year.
You know, they should, they took from planting food
Yeah.
for this last fall, they raised winter wheat on it. He could have it wheat on it, because he could have to cut some of his, his yours to go plant so much on that thing planted on it.
Turtles and all that.
They, I just went.
Like you just write all the down and you study hard. Lower areas, like you take that.
Well, even if it's not really, Molly, and talking about like Frank, this different times. This is pretty wet, there's still hills and stuff, and
Yeah,
mine's
one
on
of those
still
that
showing on it, but it-
Oh, only a free, what is there to do, and how does it spray? How does it react? What?
Cotton, and then put in a trickle with water form that's too. Right, that's where it uses road gas, that's not really so much more direct on the areas.
They do soda water, but they also. It's like, oh yeah, this is actually supposed to be the right one, but.
All right, if there's no other questions, I'll go. Okay. Looks like I've got the calendar in pretty good shape based on what you got shown on your screen. Although I've got to get the last part of it set up. But I don't have anything John Marshall Quill. And I'm missing some, because I like putting the lines on there showing you the whole week of what we're working on, instead of just the due dates sitting on there. But I'm supposed to be starting on chapter 9 today and working on it through that week. If I just put the due date out there, then we work on it. Well, I'm not sure when I'm supposed to have started on that. So I obviously need a few more lines drawn on it.
So that's March. Are we ever gonna be using these machines right here in spots?
Not really directly, you're doing them through packet tracer, but I am going to do one day when we get further along on it. Y'all get to module 12, I think it is. Y'all learned how to use switches back in module 2, if I remember right. That's when they had y'all do the switches. Module 12 is going to do essentially the same thing again, but using the switches. You're using the routers on it at that point, so you can do routers in 12. So I was looking at the whole thing yesterday when I was having to help develop a new state standard course just the afternoon. And I was like, we got to get that one. Then the state office said, we need it today. And can you tell us what are the things that are taught in this new and the 3 new Cisco courses? And then I was looking at what they drew from what I sent. And so that gave actually told me stuff that there are a few things jumped out at me about it. And I didn't really realize we did routers in here. So I hadn't really looked. That's 12 or 13. So they're going to do route that point. And that used to be done in the next course. And that's where they move stuff around. Okay. Then I will, but I am going to, we are going to put one up, router and switch, we'll put up one day to the PC, and we'll just see that it does look exactly the same as what you're doing in Texas.
Are these modern?
Those are old ones. These ones are the new ones. Those are about 15 years old. And these probably about, actually these are only about 2 years old. And then in between, that there's the switch. Okay. I held on to them. I want to be able to hold up and show you all that switch versus. No, that's not a switch, that's a hub. Sorry. That's just a hub. Just use the wrong hub.
Yeah.
So that's got no intelligence. It is powered, so when the signal, it would send a stronger signal from it out, but it didn't do anything.
Oh, so basically
The switch actually looks at the stuff and goes, where's it supposed to go, and remembers which ports it's supposed to go on. The hub gets the signal, it's powered also, or it can be powered, these are powered hubs. This power hub, it then resends it out with strength to it again, since the latency goes away on us. But it's a non-powered hub, it's just signal, just on the put out the lights, it's not reset. And so it continues to get so it's like a Stella. And so you don't want to use hubs today for networking. However, you do still use hubs in other stuff. USB, y'all still use hubs on USB. Sometimes you use a switch on USB, but most of the time you're connecting multiple devices using one port on your USB. Like mine at home, I've got 4-port USB hub, just like my keyboard and mouse into, and then it plugs into the computer on one of the ports. That hub sitting there. But the networking, you really want switches. You don't want to ever use a hub network. And that's where your configurations are being saved on. It's on there. Now, the older ones, these, is built in, you don't have the external removable flashes. The new ones are put they on to have a flash. So that makes it real easy to go from one machine to replace that router right there from another router. You just take that flash, drive it out there, flash, stick it into the new one, and we've already got the configuration all there. And it's ready to go. That makes it tricky. For this one, you download it, and then upload it to the device.
How long do you think that process will usually take?
That just a couple of minutes. But somebody had to go to the equipment to do that. And so it took some time, a little bit of time on that.
So why did they do that? Was it cost effective? I guess.
Or teacher.
Originally, that was, you weren't really using, if you think about it on some of these ones, they may be, back when they were probably 15 years old, there wasn't a lot of external flash drives at that time, and the building flash memory built into it was smaller, but cheaper. Nowadays, we got all kinds of external flash things. Pull that one back out again, notice the size of the flash drive. And look at how much storage space.
Oh, 32.
30 meg.
That's a
okay?
long time.
And that's way more space than that machine gives. And y'all wouldn't go buy a 32 meg flash drive.
No.
Okay? The only way we find one to buy is we have to go to some, not to a store to buy it new, we have to find some place that we can find it cheap that somebody's selling on eBay or whatever.
That's if it's
Because
like
this
this.
is okay.
That's almost like floppy drive level of space.
Uh-huh. It's more than that, but, and I think I may have in the front seat of my car, in the console I said, I may have actually a regular flash drive that's that size from way back that's still sitting way in there that I used to use, but I don't use now. So it's not big enough to do anything like it. As far as, but remember all these. Everything all done on the packet tracer so far. It's not a good. It's command line. That doesn't take any space in the store, just command line type stuff. It's the glue that you need all over it. Because the picture makes tons of space for that picture store. Yeah. Or even just practically showing stuff behind the picture to it. You need the graphical interface to it. It's a whole lot more storage to store up. So as long as these stay CLI, they don't need that space.
Question. You know how you said these are doing a competition for these? Cisco, you usually set up competition for
Your games on those.
32. Competitions for students who are doing this. Have you ever been a coach? No, I know you
As far as ones going into, I had one student that was wanted to do in Skills USA, the Cisco competition. And then he didn't do it. I told him on that. But I've run the competition on the state level. And I've had students do other levels of competitions in other areas. And then I've been a judge on those things. And then like cybersecurity with the Victorville Career Academy, I was actually a mentor, which was like a coach for their 4 or 5 teams that made the national cyber competition. We had one team that made the state semifinals. Wow. And this is the third year we did it. The teacher over there is the coach technically. And then she said, me, and another lady is mentors. Although mentor coach is really not having mentor technically on that is supposed to be one that's bringing in extra knowledge to them and providing them with extra knowledge, but you know, effectively coaching is part of that. You're working on it and each other what they need. Great, thanks. What is this for? That is the final exam for the old force. That was the final lab. So students, the very last, their final lab final in the fourth course, that was their assignment. Wow. And when you get to the second, third, fourth course, and you might have to do it in this course, but I really am the final. And that's still 8 weeks away. That y'all may have to do a small one, nothing like that one. Just a small one, just like what you've done in your assignments. wiring, and we have a configuration of a network. And if they do, y'all will have to, you'll do it on packet tracer, but you'll have to come and do actual cable machines. Which is something, because you're cabling them in packet tracer anyway.
Yeah.
But Cisco wants you to physically cable them also, and as part of that, that then you'll be able to know, recognize which is the router, which is the switch. Yeah. And so that's why that's actually waiting there for all of the sunset years. That's set up for what was the second, third, and fourth classes of Cisco. Yeah, that for their final lab, they had to come in and cable it. There should be straight through cables. So,
Yeah, Mr. Reed, we had to put PCs together.
College I went to before he had a final minister.
Really?
okay. So you've worked with Cisco, okay, so that usually is done in the pre-hire courses. So these what you've already learned. We're in here, okay? It should, what I'm teaching you in here should be bouncing back on at least some of the stuff you learned today. Should.
How long you
But if you're a typical student and a typical person, we don't remember a huge amount of this stuff, okay? Which is part of what you're getting taught in classes too, that what I'm teaching you, that I'm giving you all a lot of times twice as much stuff as what you really need for the class. So if you only remember 50% of what I teach you in here, then you've gotten what you need to learn anyway. This year's second year in college.
I took 2 semesters at Dalton and then took. Yeah. I don't know how many I took here. I'm hoping to graduate soon.
Wow.
She's down for the end.
2 semesters.
What's your
Which
major?
program are you in? Which program are you in?
As a computer support specialist.
So you just want this one. But
As electives. And all the electives. The next semester.
Aren't those like, what type of classes are like?
for the electives, this is a computer programs. Other programs have different restrictions. But computer programs, anything where it says electives, it's a CIST course. That do not use as required. Okay. So like, if she really falls in love with Cisco, I say, yeah, okay. Don't get me too hard on that one, okay?
So I love it.
I'm more for doing like fixing up the towers and stuff.
So, she could use in computer support, she could use the Cisco class. Right?
Yeah.
If she wanted. Or she could use an office class, like she had to take one of the office classes, but she could, if she took Excel, she could in turn use Word as an elective, or she could take HTML as an elective, or if she sort of like to learn about how Windows administration of it is, she could take those classes or whatever. Anything that we got in CIST that she's not used as another required course.
You said,
And that's the same thing in y'all's in network, assuming you're in network.
I'm in cybersecurity. You said
It's ours. Now, in cybersecurity, we're telling you what to use as your electives. Okay?
yeah.
Because if you take the courses we take you take as your elective, then you get networking for cybersecurity.
Which helps.
That then gives you 2 grades.
Really? I only got one degree.
Considering taking CompTIA, and this is my elective, because he said I would get another certificate because of that.
Which program is that?
CompTIA. CIA plus.
Okay, you're in A plus, okay. So you're in the DCC. The technical street. And you're in the computer A plus. Yeah, but you, if you get that, I think it has this. The compound thousand and electric. But you see repair and networking has the same courses, but has this course specifically. And so when you finish that one, you'll also, you'll have a great question, you see repair and networking, you'll get both these. Just like I'm just saying,
I'll get 2 degrees.
that you'll get 2 degrees. And if you follow exactly what I tell you, take psychology as your social science course, then you'll also get 2 points, the diplomas for those things. And you'll also qualify for several PCCs. You'll get several PCCs. You can read your own, probably the research you develop. So if you did psychology as one of your courses, would you use psychology or not?
I started psychology back when I was in high school as a dual enrollment class, but I don't have it.
So you haven't taken psychology here. You've done your training classes now, right? If you had done psychology, you could also qualify for on the science degree.
How would psychology help me with my career?
Well, you've got to take 5 for the degree, you've got to take 5 training classes, which is the English 1101, the humanities course, which is either American literature or it's music project.
Yeah.
You got to take social science course, which is where you put science, psychology, sociology, all those type things. You do psychology. Okay? Then you qualify for the diploma of that side. And then you got a general education elective to do also, which would be something like English, and you got to do math. So I knew there was one more.
So
Most of y'all don't like the math 11.
I'm only required to take
That's a required one across the.
Do I have to take like multiple math classes or do I just have to take one? Standard.
Okay. And some people do have to take it multiple times. Which degree?
Cybersecurity.
And then, but the reason you qualify for the diploma is actually the computer courses for the diplomas. This is computer support psychology, computer support security, or the networking, or, well, that are computer courses in the degree and the computer courses in the diploma are the same, or in the degree we have one extra course on.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you do the degree, you've done all of the ones in the diploma, and then the gen ed class, then the diploma is only 3. There's a business English class, a business math class, and an employment skills class. Well, y'all have done college level English, so that's above business English. So you've got a higher one, so you should pay for the level. Y'all will have done algebra, which is higher than business math, so you demonstrated you know how to do the lower one. And employment skills class has always been considered a psychology type class. In the past, it actually had a psychology number on it.
Yeah.
Until we became a college and it was. So you can't call that psychology, but it's really not psychology, but it's a psychology type one, but not to the depth of psychology. Okay? So if you do psychology, that means you've done a higher level than the employment skills class. And so then we say, okay, you've met all the requirements as well in psychology. And all the other stuff you're degree, you've done everything that's in the law. And so that's where we give you the degree handed home. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just follow what you guys tell me then, since that seems easier.
And likewise, where it says you've got networking electives to do 12 hours always,
Yeah.
I'm gonna make you take two more, the other two Cisco courses, used to be here, 3 Cisco courses, but now it's 2. And then you got to take a third networking course. There's one that either on Mondays or Unix, it doesn't make any difference. That in turn, with those combination of courses, that's do this cybersecurity one, and using your cybersecurity courses as your electives in networking, you met all the requirements for the networking degree. And Mr. Sherlock and I just accidentally discovered that one day when we were having to lay out the master plan.
That's pretty
On
cool.
all the courses in each of the programs, and they match together. And try not to overwork him, although I'm not sure we succeeded at that. But I've got 10 classes this semester, he's got something like 8 or 9 classes, and we're only supposed to have like 4 classes. Okay? I probably got 2, we're probably the 2 that didn't go to the whole college right now. But we had both pick up an extra course for these options being out right now.
Yeah.
And then it's just him and me to teach, essentially to teach networking and cybersecurity. We have an adjunct in Long that teaches the Cisco course, but otherwise I'm the only full-time person who can do the Cisco course. So there's 3 plus 1601, which we use the Cisco course for also, for the cybersecurity, for the security operations center. Cisco course on it for the operating system security course. So I'm using the Cisco course to do that. I'm the only one at the college that's qualified to teach that course. Even the adjunct in the other college used to be full-time. She's not qualified to teach that course. But for us to teach a Cisco course, we have to take it from Cisco in their training that we have to do for your book. And we have to compile requirements. And I did that 2 years ago. I also tried to do Cisco security year before that. During the summer, the year before that, and that one was just way too much work, but I ended up being there for the construction. Now it's Cisco all of a sudden we moved to the other stuff all through. You're going to teach that class, but I really don't want to teach that class. Most of y'all, it's way too much work.
Yeah.
It's got a 4-hour labs. And that was the killer for me. It's a lot of deep material. And the
See ya.
only time I can do the labs, my students was a part of it now. School is late at night. 4-hour lab, I'm really spending on classes like after 11 o'clock at night. When I work on a lab, guess what? Then I had to be up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I did that for a couple of weeks, and then and there was 1 or 2 labs a week to do. For several weeks, I can't do this. Because I couldn't do it during the day. Because there's stuff going on all the time. So I have to sit there and study some stuff at different times. I couldn't do a lab. I didn't have 4 hours I could cut out of the day. And I wasn't going to leave me alone for 4 hours. And the only time I had undisturbed time to work on that was after 10 or 11 at night. So I can relate on students telling me also that they're working, et cetera, and doing classes and what they're trying to do. Doesn't affect George here, it doesn't affect her. She's in one of my online classes. I'm changing the initial post on discussions now. Instead of it being due by Thursday, they'll have to make the initial post by Friday. Because when I was reading last week's discussion, I saw a number of people say the only time they can work on schoolwork is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and so they were having a hard time doing the first post. I do the requirement, you have to do that initial post so it makes it early, intentionally. So I didn't put that requirement on there. lot of people wouldn't do any of their posts until 11 o'clock Monday night. And if you did your post at 7 o'clock Monday night, and do your replies, if all your classmates were doing new posts till 11 o'clock on Monday night, there was nothing for you to reply to. So that's why I make all the initial posts surveys early. You know, when I read that, I can do that one later. Y'all still have Saturday, Sunday, Monday to see things you can reply to. And then there are some people in the class that actually do their initial post at 12:10 a.m. on Monday morning when I post. They will let me know if it's not out there. Send me an email and the discussion's not out there for this week at 1 a.m. on Monday morning. It may not be there yet, but don't panic. It will get there within a few hours. Sometimes I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do it on next week yet.
But be careful of all that business that you have all the time. You used to get some sleep. You're going to be, cranky.
So, but that was a problem when I took that class and I just dropped out of it. I thought I get some sleep. I think I just couldn't go on at that pace.
I have a question. Correct me, well, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Is that what I think it is, a cloud server? No?
Not a cloud server, it's just a server.
Because it looks like it, because
Now, on the cloud, the servers that are running the cloud are all just regular servers. Those big ones, okay? That's a server that somebody gave us.
it's very large.
But it's a larger machine. You notice it's got large number of ports back there. It's got more fans on it to cool it because it runs hot. Notice it's got 3 fans on the back of it. And if we were to open it up, there's probably got about 6 or 7 slots that you can hard drives into. Okay.
Now you can tell that it's notable because they use PC
It's
PS2 ports.
probably not real old. We just got that a year or 2 ago, and I gave it to us. It's probably only about 10 years old.
I don't know, but I don't know who uses PS2 ports. The ones that use the old mouse and keyboard with the old.
Is it using the? Okay, yeah, it's using PS2 ports. Yeah. It will. And you got those still here in some things, but generally it's USB nowadays. But that would put it more than 5 years old.
Anything about it, do you think PS2 is better than USB?
USB would be better than one. But when PS2 came out, USB wasn't here.
Yeah, it didn't exist. Could you imagine a PS2 thumb drive? But we were still on that standard.
And actually, the PS2 was a modification of the old port from before that. That's the same looking port, but the rear port was solid. The white one? There's your PS2. But if you go back to the 80s,
Wasn't it?
machines, they had round ports that looked just like the PS2, but were about that big around. And that wound up pretty nice. Well, for the keyboard, and the mouse really went to PS2, the keyboard's just really big. So if you find some older keyboards, you probably got to do.
Was the indicator black on the board? You know, after PS2, then the mouse and keyboard with the green or orange. Actually, purple.
They weren't color electronics, you had those things. The first ones you really got color meaning on it is the USB. We got the USB 3, it's the blue, and the USB 4. That's just coming out. They're just finishing improving the standard on it. USB 4 is going to use another color. Maybe white on it. I'm not sure. It's going to be a different coloring on it. So you can tell the part. USB 4, I think they just improved the standard on it, although there's some USB 4 stuff out there, but the standard wasn't there yet. And it's a whole lot faster.
So what does the port look like for USB port? or is it the same standard as every USB?
On the USB 4, I think it's the same one, just like 2 and 3 are got the same physical one on it.
Because I see that they have these new USB, it's like a USB port, but it's more like mouse and keyboard, it's a C connector, use that now these days for
And so
transfer.
you got that one too out there, but you do have the USB-C on. The general one, I think, is still going to be the same direct.
USB
Some of that, you just got some different things now. USB 4 will actually carry current through. USB 3 can, but not really that on that. USB 4 will carry current through the USB 4 to power devices. And your USB device will have to be put in the wall. So like us running the sprinkler head, you can run a USB 4 to power from the sprinkler head on and supply power to it through the USB 4.
You imagine the thing about jinx a little bit wireless for
And again, the other one is with the newest wireless stuff, you can actually send power through the air also, which is free. I haven't really understood that one fully, but you can actually send power to wireless devices on wireless.
Isn't that technology old already? I mean, wasn't there one that used extensively?
With the wireless 6, you got full capabilities on it. With the AC, you had a little bit to it, but you didn't really have it. Well, AC is 6, but before AC/6, that it was very limited and depending on the devices you had, or you could send power across. Of course, it's just like powering your phone. It still fascinates me that we can use those chargers where you don't have to plug your phone into the charger, so you don't buy it. It just transmits across wirelessly and charges your phone. And I can use that before it. Actually, on my phone was taking more time in one place. And they had one sitting there.
I will take care. Take good time. Kira, sorry.
How long do you want to tell me? I'll pay for a day. You used it last Sunday.
Yeah.
It's in there. It's wonderful.
Two more questions. One, you was talking about how for the general education classes, how there's like one or the other. What if I took 2 American literature classes and then a music appreciation? Because that was told to.
2 American literature.
And 1 music appreciation.
Okay, now, you could do, depending on, if you haven't done your gen ed elective,
No, I have. Like, I finished most of my general education classes.
that's what I was guessing, you probably transferred them all in.
Yeah, but like I said, over there, my boss was like, yeah, you're gonna take these. I got 2 American literature and music appreciation, which I don't understand because
Shouldn't be taking 2 of the same class. Let's pull your record up and look at it. Because I can pull it out right here. I see what you need. Matter of fact, I need to stop the recording. I've been recording the whole time.